Hello everyone, I hope this video finds you very well. Today I wanted to talk about something a little bit different, something that was kind of sparked in my mind based on some of the news stories that have been happening recently due to events in the Lower Mainland having to do with violence amongst the youth of Surrey. Whenever we're talking about societal constructs, usually what's relevant to also think about is what are the psychological variables? What are the patterns? What's changed and what's staying the same? So when it comes to the different generations, more or less most of us in the South Asian diaspora understand that for our parents' generation, the baby boomers, the original immigrants, their sole focus was just to survive and advance. So, very much just focusing on the basic needs, trying to put food on the table, establish some sort of a secure foundation and base in a brand new country, and learning the language. A lot of kind of learning curve things where there wasn't much bandwidth left for kind of the emotional upbringing for their children, the next generation, which we can think of as us mid-30s people, Generation Y. So for us, then, while in our childhood we were still kind of balancing our interest and need for security and safety, we also started to develop higher level basic needs such as acceptance and belonging. But because our parents and we still very much watched the struggle and what was relevant to that struggle, sometimes fear and hardship and stress, we weren't really consumed and taken over by the need for acceptance and belonging. So we still kind of have that survival instinct very strong, and those values and virtues in terms of knowing what's priority and what's not, and how to have impulse control more or less got developed for most of us. Fast forward to the next generation, Gen Z, where now there's a whole new variable in the ball game, which is social media. Well, now the need for acceptance and belonging is at the top of the list because the security and safety in terms of food, shelter, water has been secured. It's not so much of a survive and advance day-to-day struggle as it is more about affluence and outdoing one another. So the landscape of society has changed, virtues and values have changed, and thus the wiring of our brains for the next generation has changed. So what does this mean on a scientific level? Well, what it means is if we're not really developing interest in security and safety seeking behaviors, and we have the luxury of now focusing on materialistic happiness, well, that might lead to a slower development of the prefrontal cortex, which is our impulse control, decision making, and rational thought center. All three things that are really important when it comes to getting in altercations, conflict, and unfortunately, fatal interactions as well. So, how to have that ability to abstain from engaging in dangerous behaviors with weapons and interactions with one another in that sense. So, if we're focused more on superficial ways of filling those internal voids, because maybe the parents still haven't come up to par in terms of the emotional upbringing, well, then our brains are kind of preoccupied with more consumerism focused ways of attaining happiness, and we're not really developing the ability to self-correct, self-reflect, and be able to have that impulse control. The need for acceptance and belonging maybe has overshadowed our ability to reflect and think about, is the way we're living our lives, or are the choices we're making sustainable? And do they align with the type of human that we want to be in the big picture? So, what I mean by that is, think about with instant gratification now at our fingertips for the latest generation, we really don't know how to sit with discomfort anymore. If we're feeling unpleasant, more or less all of our coping mechanisms have to do with just one click away, being able to shop and have your happiness attained in that way, instant gratification, or order food, just hop on an app and have your happiness attained that way, instant gratification. But what's missing is our ability to cope and self-regulate in a long-term sense, in a more sustainable way. So we're not developing these core adaptive responses that are sometimes necessary when it comes to interpersonal relationships. If we haven't practiced how to deal with anger, sadness, or anxiety, then it's going to be much more heightened when another person is making us feel threatened or small. We're just not getting to practice those skills. The other layer that's relevant in terms of what's changed over the generations is how social media influences our self-worth and perceived identity. So if we're constantly comparing ourselves and feeling inferior, well, then there might be a tendency to overcompensate. And when we don't have good impulse control and decision making, that can lead to some pretty catastrophic outcomes. It's very sad to see these things happen amongst the youth, but we also cannot villainize or chastise them for the way things are going, because there really haven't been enough dialogues about how social media and this instant gratification age is influencing the way that our brains are developing. So what this means is pausing, taking inventory and note of how us older generation people are modeling. Well, how do you try to create happiness in your life? Are they sustainable ways of making yourself happy and content? And the other thing is just kind of recognizing that that feeling of acceptance and belonging might come easier if we're not constantly kind of striving for materialistic or superficial happiness, and practicing how to connect with the youth on a deeper more emotional level, so that they're feeling validated, so that they're not longing for that in all the wrong places. Essentially, just somebody has to be the change and change the way that we try to get the happy in our lives, so that if we practice impulse control and have more sustainable long-term thinking, then maybe the youth can also see that being modeled to them and replicate that behavior and feel like it's possible also. What are your thoughts and feelings about what's been going on? Do you think that it is a wiring response change, or is this just the direction that society's headed? Are parents even more far removed now? Does it maybe have to do with the economy and financial stress in the home? Are kids just slipping through the cracks? Or do you think it has to do more with technology and all the changes there? All in all, maybe it's not one or the other, maybe it's a combination of things. But I do want to express my condolences, and my sincere sadness about what has occurred and the life that was lost. I hope that this reaches the hearts and homes of at least one person, that maybe it sparks an idea in, and there might be a ripple effect of change in that regard. I'd love to hear your feedback in regard to what other topics you'd like to hear me speak about. But until next time, I'll keep this one a little bit short. And I will see you next time. Take good care, everyone.